on, time out. I'm not someone who seeks attention. And when we just had that ceremony there, it's a little uncomfortable for me because I don't feel worthy in a lot of ways. It's hard for me to just open up and accept that. And we are starting a new beginning, and I am the spiritual leader. And this is where I want to be. Not because I believe in some heaven in the afterlife or I'm afraid of some hell. Not because I think it's going to make my net worth grow up tremendously. But because I've made a decision in this life that I would rather give a shit. I would rather love because I want to. And I feel so supported here. I feel lifted up. I feel carried over. I feel safe. And I want to honor everything that Jane has created and Kevin and Claire have carried forth in creating this culture. And I want to honor that, and it's only my desire to keep moving forward. I desire to be, in my life, a living solution. And believe me, this life has given me enough suffering that I can really appreciate little moments of joy. You know, and I've experienced some real suffering. And if I hadn't have experienced those kinds of humblings and sufferings, I would be an insufferable, arrogant jerk. And so I'm grateful for that. And there's, so to borrow a saying from the recovery programs, you cannot give away what you don't have. You can't give away what you don't have. You can't really love someone unless you have some love for yourself. You can't respect someone unless you have some respect for yourself. You can't forgive someone unless you have some forgiveness for yourself. And written on the Oracle of Delphi, which was this thing in Greece way back when, there was these witches who did all kinds of psychedelics. And people would go there for wisdom. So these crazy witches and psychedelics would had an effect on the whole world with what they channeled at that time. But the biggest thing they learned, and this went back to Egypt and Cana and India, was to know thyself, to begin with oneself. Until we can begin healing within ourselves and forgiving within ourselves and loving ourselves and respecting ourselves, we can't give that away. We can't share that. And can we go to our first slide, Kev? Oh, it's Laurel. Thank you, Laurel. So I've been working with Dan and Beth Miller quite a bit recently and been learning a little bit about neuroscience and conflict resolution. And Dan and Beth are amazing human beings. And they've been working with this for 30 years. And nothing I'm going to say here today is new. This is none of any kind of genius of my own personal self. I'm just a messenger here. I got a clue, and I want to share this clue because it's now working in my life. And Dan and Beth have been working this in their relationship and in their life for 30 years, and they live it. They're living expressions of this. They've become wiser and more functional in their lives because of this. And I also want to point out that my beautiful wife helped me build this keynote and collaborated with me on this talk and helped me a great deal in the process of how to present this. And we're going to present, this is a lot of information. We're not going to try to do all the information. It's my goal to make this as simple as I can so we can take some of this and start working with it with ourselves so that we may show up in our interpersonal relationships with our partners, with our children, with our parents as coherent beings, so that we can contribute less to the problems of this world and the problems we create for ourselves, and that we may contribute more to the solution. Let's go to our first slide. Okay, so there's this beautiful illustration. And this is from Dan Siegel, who's brilliant in interpersonal neurobiology, and he's part of the Science Used as Spirituality. And I thought about this. So science came from the practices of mystics and philosophers. And we can use, in open source spirituality, we can use all of this for our spiritual growth. So as far as like a map of the brain, if you were to take your hand and open it up, and in this illustration, imagine your arm is your spine. And then it comes up to the base of your spine. We'll imagine that as being right here. And right here is our amygdala. And this is what they call our reptilian brain. I guess that's old information. It's no longer talked, but this is our automated system. So right now our heart's beating, our body's digesting. We're doing all this stuff which is totally unconscious. It's part of our automated system. Now, our amygdala has a search every few seconds for any sort of danger. And this is part of our evolution. Searching every few seconds, looking for some stressor or danger. Now, our amygdala doesn't know the difference between a tsunami coming in and we have to run up a hill, or a lion's chasing us, or someone's attacking us. Our amygdala just looks for stresses. And what happens is when the amygdala takes charge, it just kind of takes over. It's marshaling all of our resources to face a challenge. It releases cortisol. It releases adrenaline, which are poisons. These things aren't good for us in the long term. But in the short term, we might need that if we were actually running from a lion. So our prefrontal cortex wraps over this. And when our prefrontal cortex is engaged, it's as though our circuit is completed. It's when we feel safe that our prefrontal cortex is engaged. And then we have our whole vagus nerve, and we'll look at that briefly. But how this works is if we start to feel stressed, or we start to feel in danger, what this does is it wants to flip up our prefrontal cortex to prepare us to deal with flight or freeze. And sometimes this is unconscious. And this occurred so that we could survive. But sometimes we don't realize when our prefrontal cortex is disengaged that we're shutting off all of our reasoning, all of our connections to our higher selves. Let's go to our next slide. So the vagus nerve goes from our head all the way down. Now, this may be news to you. I know a lot of you already know a bunch of this. But we have three brains. There are three different parts of our being where synapsis occurs, three different parts of our body that carries and holds memories. And that is in our brain, in our heart, and in our gut. And when our prefrontal cortex is engaged, we have access to all of this. We become a complete circuit, conducting and transmitting. Now let's go to our next slide. So when the amygdala activates and our prefrontal cortex is disengaged, it's flight, fright, or freeze. The body's closed and contracted. It marshals our breath to be shallower, our blood to be in our upper body. We begin to release cortisol and adrenaline. We have feelings of panic, shock, fear, anger, disgust, and grief. We have little choice in our actions, little choice in our thoughts. Things that can contribute to this are drugs and alcohol, our stress, our being lonely, angry, or tired. But if you can imagine, when we're in these states, this is when we do all the damage in our lives. This is when we're reacting. We're not thinking, we're just reacting. This could be caused by something that triggers a trauma, a memory in our life that we can't handle. So the purpose of this talk, my desire, is to inspire you to begin to look at yourself, begin to know thyself, to be a witness to ourselves, so that we're not just drones repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. We're not like NPCs repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. That we're not subject to the media, the institutions, the things going on in the world, so that we may be operating our units as in mastery, so that we may learn to grow together. Let's go to our next slide, because this is where we can. So when our prefrontal cortex is engaged, we begin to self-regulate. We can then have empathy. We can bring ourselves in a state of safety. Our body becomes open, our muscles relax, our breath deepens into what Dan would say a baby breath. Imagine just an innocent breath. We can have feelings of calmness, sadness, joy, and anger. And if you notice, the feelings are the same when closed or open. You know, when it's open and we're just running from our amygdala, we can have the feelings of fear, and then we're victims of those feelings, or anger, and we're victims of that anger. Another interesting point is those feelings of anger are addictive. When people get into rage, a lot of them feel a high from that. You know, they're sourcing a sense of empowerment through the feelings of anger. I think it's also sick and interesting. I know with myself, there are times when I would feel completely defeated and completely awful, and I would nurture that. You know, I would nurture that feeling, as though I would run scenarios and thoughts and stories through my head, as though I'm nurturing this feeling of being disempowered, as though it was my own little baby. And I would suffer. And there's no shortage of suffering. I mean, the truth is, you all have the free will, and you can suffer as much as you want to. But the purpose here is to realize that it's a choice. And we're the ones who are responsible for that. We can suffer as much as we want to, or we can begin to negotiate these states to learn and practice together. So in the state of being complete or in resonance instead of dissonance, we can have thoughts and entertain these emotions, which may be fear, they may be anger, but instead of just reacting to them and causing chaos and harm, we can then begin to ask the question of what's the lesson here for me? Is this triggering an emotion I had from being disempowered at 5 years old? Is this an emotion that I'm ignoring or hiding because I just can't handle it? We begin to hold ourselves in love. We become a creator of safety. We begin to create a resonance of safety. We can hold our own anger in. We can begin to notice this. I noticed this morning my prefrontal cortex was not engaged. You know, I woke up and tripped walking out the door. I tried to gather clothes to go pick my daughter up in case when I picked her up she wasn't wearing clean clothes. And no, she wasn't. But she has on a whole cat outfit, and I couldn't make her take it off to change her clothes. But I noticed that, and I noticed when someone pulled in front of me in traffic. You know, I'm going right into reactivity. You know, I'm creating a space with my daughter that's not safe. I'm creating a space within myself that's not, and I'm coming here to give this talk. And I literally have to say, okay, hang on, time out, wait. What can I do to get out of this? What can I do to find another way? I firmly believe when I'm in those states, I'll even say to myself, there's another way of looking at this moment, this person, this place, that is empowered and that is safe. And we are actors in this life. Life is calling us forth for more than being an egomaniac. Life is calling us forth for being more than just an unconscious drone or NPC operating cluelessly. This guy named Jesus had this, he talked about the people of the world being blown about with no direction, confused with no safety. It's kind of the same thing. I'm imploring you, I'm behooving you to look at yourselves through the eyes of a baby, to become like little children again. Let us notice our own operations. Let's realize that we have power over ourselves. Let's go to our next slide. So these are just some tools. There are many tools for mastery. We're just going to talk about a few of them. And please realize that this is work that only you can do for yourself. No one can do this work for you. And the very act of beginning this work is a step toward the solution, that we may become a living solution. And I believe I believe with certainty in my bones that as we do this, we affect the whole. As we begin to reconsider ourselves and our actions, as we find just moments of peace, or just moments of mastery, or just once where we choose a different way, that we give everyone else permission to do that. That we hold this up as an alternative way to live a life. We value it. I know the home I grew up in, the person who could throw the biggest fit won. The person who would punch the wall, the person who could yell the loudest won. And I literally grew up to create that in my life. And I remember having a partner, and I could not out-crazy her crazy. It got to a point where I wasn't willing to punch the wall. I wasn't willing to be so overtly violent acting and yelling and dominant that I would win. All of a sudden, that win was no longer valuable to me. It didn't seem valuable to me anymore. There had to be another way. And once I realized that one little thing, that there's got to be another way than this, because this hurts. It hurts. It hurts to feel scared. It hurts to feel lost. It hurts to feel out of control. It hurts to be angry. And so I would like to just give a few tools on this. And one is breathing exercises. There's many. Look up box breathing. As your attorney, I advise you to look up box breathing. But I honestly believe that our breath is the gateway to another world. It's like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz clicking her ruby slippers together and saying there's no place like home. Our breath is our way home. Just a few deep breaths to try to find just a touch of gentleness within us can open a door to a different possibility that is more worthy of children of loving cosmos. Just a simple breath. And the thing about all these exercises is you don't have to sign a contract. You don't have to go online and find it. You don't have to get permission, a certification, or approval from anyone, because these all lie within us now. We have everything within us now to take that next step in our human evolution. And each time we do this, we give others permission to do it also. Tapping. So we have these two hemispheres, and we're going to be talking more about this. So me as a minister or spiritual leader, my desire is to get us all on the same page moving forward in our spiritual growth. And we're starting with ourselves. It all starts with us. Our relationship with ourselves is the most important thing going on in our life. If we were on a plane and all of a sudden it lost pressure and the oxygen masks come on, we're not going to be any good to anyone else until we take that and put it on ourselves, and then we can help others. This is the part for us to start taking responsibility for ourselves and growing and looking at ourselves so that we can begin to help others. So tapping is a thing where you tap, and you can look this up too. And this is about synchronizing our neural hemispheres, which then brings us into resonance, brings us into a place of safety. There's this thing called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When you notice yourself losing it, when you flip your lid, when you go from easygoing and kind to I just want to tear stuff up, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, even in your confusion, if you can just do that, and believe me, that's the beginning of enlightenment, is when we notice we're losing it, is to list 5 things you can see around you. I could say Bob's glasses. I could say Savannah's coffee cup. The clock on the wall reminding me what time it is. Time. The stained glass windows. I'm already calming down. List 4 things you can touch. Well, I can feel my clothes on my body. I can touch my tongue to the missing tooth in the upper right-hand side. I'll get that fixed someday. I can feel my feet and my shoes. I can rub my fingertips together. I'm beginning to come back into resonance. List 3 things you can hear. Well, I can hear the buzz in the background. I can hear clicking with feet. I can hear a baby screaming in the background. And I love baby screaming in the background because that's life. And I'm a dad. and I miss my babies. List 2 things you can smell. But you're getting the point. The point is life is not running away from me. Wayne Dyer said one of the most brilliant things in the history of mankind, that the mind makes a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. Another thing we can do, which isn't on here, is to become the witness. I don't know if you know this, but you're not a body. You're not a name. You're not an occupation. You're not even a sex. You're not white. You're not American. You're really something else entirely. There is something to us that is beyond time and space. And in fact, I think the reason why death is so hard for us is because our truth, our nature is eternal. There is a part of us that existed before our first inhalation when we were born, and that will exist before our last exhalation when we pass out of this body. There is a part of us that is eternal. And if we can just realize that, when we start to flip out, if we can look at that with curiosity, oh, I noticed I'm really mad. Something in this life that can take me from being a relatively nice guy to a pissed off man ready to throw down is if I see someone throw a cigarette butt on the ground. And when I get to those moments, can I look at this with curiosity? Oh, I notice this. Where's this coming from? What is this here to teach me? You know, I'm no longer subject to the circumstances of this world. My personal sovereignty is no longer subject to the circumstances of this world. Imagine the freedom there is in that. And it's not as though I live this 24 hours a day. I might only have 15 minutes. But I will tell you, just to know that that's possible is one of the most beautiful things I've ever known. I remember the first time I realized I can't blame all my stuff on everyone else, I felt naked. Because I had all these stories of why everything was everyone else's fault, and I went through this period of time where I felt naked, that I could no longer blame everything on everyone else. Once I began to accept that, then all of a sudden I became empowered that I can change the things in me that aren't working anymore. I can begin to know myself. Life is calling us forth to become more than unconscious zombies. And the time is now. Let's go to our last one. So I thought it would be fun to try this. Let's normalize this. Let's normalize this adventure, this journey into knowing ourselves. Wherever you share, with your partner, with your children, with your parents, with a neighbor, share your victories. As you go through these processes, share the times it works. When you have epiphanies and aha moments, share those. Maybe your media is TikTok. Maybe it's Facebook. We could go on the Unity page and share little victories we have in this. So that even though no one else can take this journey for us, we're doing it as a community. Share times when it works. Share times when it diffuses a situation. That's one of the biggest things for me is I've noticed that just by sitting and listening to myself and others, I notice problems just dissolve of their own accord. I notice my experience deepening and enriching. I notice my ability to appreciate simple moments when I'm washing dishes or driving my daughter home from school. A lot of times I'll be working alone, and I'll be working alone, and I'll have aha moments. And I realize I used to do this in a complete anxiety wave, and now I can find some sense of charm. But I encourage you to share this. Let's normalize this. We're doing this as individuals, but we can share this together so that we can go and consciously create a community. It's my desire that we have a community-led ministry. It's my desire that we can be servants as leaders, and we're doing this together, and the beginning is to know thyself. And for me to be able to get up here and speak lovingly, I feel like I'm winning when I get to speak lovingly. You know, that's one of the things that's so precious about children or pets is we can just be so loving with them because we feel safe. You know, let's create a community where we can be safe with each other. Because to open one's heart and to speak lovingly is a beautiful blessing. And I do not take it for granted. And I wish you all the best.